Ever get that feeling like you want to really grasp something, something kind of complex, like you want to get right to the core of it, but without having to wade through it a ton of information?
I think we all get that.
Well, that's exactly what we aim for here on the Depth Dive, right? To go deep, but keep it engaging. And today, we've got a fascinating combo lined up for you. I'm really intrigued by this one.
It is an interesting pairing, for sure. We're going to be looking at Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, a classic, of course.
Oh, yeah, everyone knows Frankenstein.
But we're going to view it through a very specific lens, that of the philosophy presented in The Law of One.
Okay, so just to get us all on the same page, Frankenstein. Victor Frankenstein, this brilliant but kind of obsessed guy.
Driven, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, driven. He's driven to unlock the secrets of life itself. And, well, he actually does it. He creates this being, but things go very, very wrong.
It's a story of abandonment, a lot of isolation, both for the creator and the creation, and this relentless pursuit with tragic consequences.
It really makes you think about what it means to create something, what responsibility comes with it, and what it means to be human, right?
Absolutely. Now, on the flip side, we have the Law of One. This is material that claims to be channeled communication, coming from an entity called Ra,
And it was received by, who was it again?
the LO Research Group.
Right, right. And the Law of One basically lays out this whole spiritual philosophy with the central idea being.
That everything is interconnected, all part of one infinite creator. Unity is at the heart of it.
So we've got creation, responsibility, the nature of being. Big themes in both of these, right?
And what's really interesting to me is that Frankenstein and the Law of One don't reference each other at all.
Not a single mention. They come from totally different worlds, different times, different everything. So what we're going to try to do today is,
See what happens when we bring them together.
yeah, like putting puzzle pieces from different boxes together. Do they fit? Do they show us a new picture? And specifically, we're going to look for insights on creation, responsibility, and how we understand our own existence. Are you ready for this deep dive?
Let's dive in.
All right, so first things first, the act of creation itself. In Frankenstein, Victor is obsessed with cracking the mysteries of life.
He's immersed in what they called natural philosophy back then. He even talks about dreams of forgotten alchemists with a kind of fondness. He found the scientific approaches of his time limiting.
Too focused on the small stuff, right?
He wasn't interested in incremental progress. He wanted something huge, transformative.
He mentions those old school scientists who were trying to figure out immortality and how to control nature. He really thought contemporary science was missing the big picture.
His ambition was boundless. It was that drive to go beyond the limits that led him to that creation.
So you have that very deliberate, almost ego-driven act of creation in Frankenstein. But then in the Law of One, creation comes from a totally different place, right?
It's the inherent nature of this fundamental consciousness they call intelligent infinity. Not a personal God, but the energy, the potential from which everything arises. Yeah. And it's not a one-time thing. Creation is an ongoing process, constantly expressing itself in new and complex ways.
So one is very intentional, driven by a specific person's will, and the other is like the essential nature of reality itself. That's a pretty stark contrast right there.
It is. And the next point of comparison that gets really interesting is responsibility.
Because Victor totally abandons his creation, right? Like the second it takes its first breath,
He's horrified by how it looks and essentially washes his hands of the whole thing.
which obviously leads to all the disaster that follows.
And that failure of responsibility is a huge point in the Law of One, but from a different angle.
Yeah.
Because if everything comes from the same source, this intelligent infinity, then every single act of creation has huge implications.
Even our thoughts.
Even thoughts. They talk about thought forms as having a real existence. Our creations are extensions of ourselves and of this universal consciousness. So there's a built-in responsibility.
Which Victor completely ignored.
He treated the creature as totally separate from himself, so he didn't feel any obligation.
But the Law of One says that separation is an illusion.
And we see how damaging that illusion can be when we look at how the creature develops. Initially, it describes itself as benevolent, innocent.
But all the rejection, the suffering it experiences, changes it. It becomes the monster Victor fears.
There's that heartbreaking line where it says, "I was benevolent and good. Misery made me a fiend. Make me happy, and I shall again be virtuous." It shows how our environment, how we're treated, shapes who we become.
This could be connected to what the Law of One calls densities of consciousness.
Right. And these aren't physical places, but levels of awareness.
Yeah.
Consciousness evolves by moving through these densities, and that's driven by our experiences and choices.
So we can make choices that move us towards, let's say, goodness or service to others.
Exactly. But we can also make choices that lead us in the opposite direction, toward what they call service to self. The creature, starting out good but turning vengeful because of its suffering, that could be seen as a negative polarization.
Because of its experiences in, what would they call it, third density?
Third density, yes. That's where we are right now.
Fascinating. So the creature's transformation is a kind of twisted learning process, influenced by a world that only showed it cruelty. Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Let's talk about knowledge, because both Frankenstein and the Law of One have a lot to say about it, and the suffering it can bring.
In Frankenstein, it's Victor's pursuit of knowledge that kickstarts the whole tragedy.
His mother dies because of his work. He feels responsible for William and Justine's deaths. It's like his thirst for knowledge brings a wave of suffering that crashes down on everyone around him.
And by the end, he hates the very idea of natural philosophy.
He even says the sight of scientific instruments made him feel agony.
And the creature's journey with knowledge is no less painful. It learns language and customs by observing the DeLacy family.
Which ironically just makes it more aware of how different it is, how isolated it is.
And then there's that powerful quote, "Of what a strange nature is knowledge. It clings to the mind when it has once seized on it like a lichen on the rock. Knowledge, once it takes hold, it's hard to shake off. And for the creature, it becomes a source of constant pain."
Such a great quote, so vivid. So both sources show us that knowledge doesn't necessarily lead to happiness. In fact, it can bring a lot of suffering.
But the Law of One adds another layer to this. It sees knowledge as an essential part of a journey of understanding,
Understanding ourselves, others.
and the Creator. But it does acknowledge that the more you understand, the more aware you become of the suffering in the world.
So sorrow can actually increase with knowledge.
In a way, yes.
Okay, that makes sense. So both Frankenstein and the Law of One see the potential for knowledge to bring suffering, but the Law of One puts it in this context of spiritual growth. It's not just bad, it's part of a larger process. Which leads us to another big theme, suffering itself.
In Frankenstein, suffering is pretty much purely destructive.
It leads to despair, more suffering, and eventually death for both Victor and the creature. This whole cycle of revenge is fueled by pain and loss.
But the Law of One has a different take on it. It sees suffering as a potential catalyst
A catalyst for what?
for growth, for that polarization we were talking about, moving towards either service to others or service to self.
So suffering isn't inherently bad.
It's how we respond to it that matters. It can be a turning point, a chance to evolve.
Wow. Frankenstein is so bleak about suffering, while the Law of One sees it as this potential opportunity. Really interesting how two sources can have such different views on something so fundamental. Okay, let's talk about something else that's super important in Frankenstein. Isolation.
Both Victor and the creature experience this incredible loneliness.
Victor isolates himself with his work, then later with his guilt. And the creature, well, it's rejected by everyone.
The creature just wants connection. It watches the DeLacy family, longing to be a part of that, but it can't overcome the way it looks.
And that isolation really clashes with the whole idea of unity in the Law of One.
The concept of other selves is central to that idea.
We're all connected, all part of the same creator. The separation we feel is basically an illusion.
The Law of One talks about the Confederation of Planets, and their whole mission is to help people understand this unity.
So for them, overcoming that sense of separation is key to spiritual growth.
Exactly.
So in the context of the Law of One, the isolation that Victor and the creature experience is like a distortion of reality.
It shows us how painful it is to live without that sense of connection, without recognizing our shared origin.
It makes you wonder if things could have been different in Frankenstein. Like, there are these moments where a different outcome seems possible.
Like when the creature pleads with Victor, "Make me happy, and I shall again be virtuous."
There's a hint that maybe, just maybe, things could have gone another way.
If Victor had responded with compassion. Now, this idea of potential transformation connects to what the Law of One calls the harvest.
The harvest.
It's a point in planetary evolution where beings move to higher levels of consciousness. It's based on their vibration, which is tied to whether they're oriented towards service to others or service to self. It's like a natural progression.
A sorting process based on, let's say, spiritual development.
You could say that. And there's also the concept of wanderers. These are souls who have come to Earth from higher densities to help with our evolution.
And they often feel out of place.
Right, exactly. That feeling of being different, of not belonging. It resonates with the creature's experience.
It makes you think, could the creature be seen as a kind of tragic wanderer figure? Okay, one last thing I want to touch on. The ethics of creation and intervention. Victor creating life without any plan for its well-being, without thinking about the consequences.
It's a huge ethical issue.
It's like a warning about unchecked ambition, especially in science when it's not guided by ethics.
And then you have the Confederation and the Law of One. With their very careful approach, they talk about waiting for a calling, a genuine desire for contact.
Respecting free will.
Yes. They even admit that some of their past attempts at intervention were naive. They realized it can disrupt natural development,
They offer guidance, but they don't force it.
which is the total opposite of Victor, who just creates without thinking and then abandons his creation.
It's fascinating how these two works, Frankenstein and the Law of One, approach these big questions.
Frankenstein is this powerful story showing us what can go wrong when we don't think about the consequences of our actions.
Yeah.
And the Law of One gives us this whole philosophical framework for understanding those actions in a larger cosmic context.
We have responsibility, knowledge, the need for connection, the potential for transformation. These are universal themes that resonate across time and cultures. So as you listen to this, we want you to think about your own creations in life, the projects you're working on, the relationships you have.
Even the way you shape your own identity.
What responsibility do you feel for those creations? How does your understanding of interconnectedness, of other selves, guide your choices? And how might the challenges you face, your own personal catalyst, be pushing you to evolve? It might not always be comfortable, but it's part of the process. If you want to explore these ideas further, maybe revisit Frankenstein or dive into the Law of One yourself, it's a fascinating journey. This has been a truly thought-provoking deep dive.
It has.
And as always, the exploration continues.